Yo, get in, chop.
Yo, what's up, you guys? It's your girl, Trudy LPC, and thank you for tuning into this week's episode of the Self-Aware and Up podcast. It has been an amazing season so far, and I know we are getting closer to the end of the season, and you guys are probably like me, getting a little bit sad because you won't get to hear all of these amazing guests after a couple of weeks. But this week, I have an amazing guest. I'm really excited for her to share a little bit about her story and about her journey as a trauma hypnotist. Her name is Tiffany Toombs. She also has a podcast that she's going to tell you guys a little bit called the Cycle Breaker Show. And she is also a high performance mindset coach. So a lot of different things that she does. And I'm really, really grateful to have her with me today to share with me and with you guys about her journey and the things that she do to help people reset their system, break cycles in their lives, and really perform overall in a better mindset. So without further ado, please welcome to the Self-Aware and Up podcast, Tiffany Toombs. Hey, Tiffany, how you doing today?
Hey, I'm great. I'm super excited to be here.
I am really excited to chat with you. Definitely can't wait to hear and learn more about you and your journey. So I guess we can go ahead and just dive in and have you tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you said, I'm a trauma hypnotist and a high performance mindset coach, which is just a lot of words to say that I help people get un-effed up, right?
Okay.
to take the effed upness and turn it into a superpower. So, and that really started through my own journey. Mm-hmm. When I was 3 months old, my mom left my biological dad. He was mentally and emotionally abusive to her, so she left, but he still got some custody. So every other weekend, I still had to see him. And it wasn't actually him that became my abuser, but my stepmom that was actually a domestic violence survivor. And so I experienced like firsthand how unhealed trauma gets perpetuated. And so starting from the age of like 3, she would lock me in closets and burn me with curling irons. And for years, she told me that strangers hated blonde-haired, blue-eyed girls, which I was a lot blonder back then. But if a stranger found a blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl, they would unalive them. And so whenever I acted up, which really meant like take the spotlight off of her, she would put me in the car, drive me to the outskirts of the city I'm from up in Canada, and tell me she was going to leave me for a stranger to come and find. And so I created this belief that like I was never safe and that I wasn't lovable and I wasn't worthy. And that played through every friendship, every relationship. I became like this overachieving, people-pleasing perfectionist throughout my teen years, my childhood into my 20s. And then everything kind of came to a head in my late 20s when on the day I found out I was pregnant, I found out my boyfriend at the time actually had a girlfriend in a different state. And my entire life collapsed. Wow. And then I found out he was a compulsive liar. I miscarried the baby. And it just brought me to this brink of like, that was my moment of like the self-awareness of how effed up I was. Mm-hmm. And that if I didn't start healing and I didn't start making some change, I wasn't going to survive. And so that led me on this journey that's brought me here to helping thousands of other people heal their stuff.
Wow. Yeah, that's quite an experience, like starting very young, a lot of trauma tied into just your upbringing and the things you experience. And it's crazy to kind of hear, like, I mean, we always hear the idea of hurt people, but to think of this woman going through this type of abuse and then inflicting that on you, it's just like, it really is a cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was interesting because, and I think a lot of people do this as a protective mechanism, is we justify our trauma in some way. And it's like we're afraid to call it abuse because then that makes it more real or it makes it more intense. And so for a long time, I was like, no, like my life isn't that bad. when I was 10, I stopped having to see them, and I only had to see them every other weekend. So, it was only from like 3 till 10 that it happened, and only every other weekend. Somebody else has it full time. And it wasn't until I started my healing journey that I realized, like, it doesn't matter if you die in 7 inches of water or 7 feet of water. Like, dead is dead and abuse is abuse. Right. Yeah. And that was really a game changer for me, to realizing, like, and I think giving yourself permission to acknowledge, like, I have been hurt, or, in some cases, my parents are great people. Like my mom and my stepdad, great people. Mm-hmm. They knew something was going on, though. They knew something wasn't quite right, but they also didn't want to face it because of whatever that meant for them. And so, in healing, there's like this duality of recognizing that some people can be good people and we can love them, but also at the same time, our needs didn't get met. And so those were game changers for me in my journey.
Right. Yeah. So many times we turn our eye from abuse because the pain of kind of dealing with it and realizing that I didn't protect them, I didn't take care of them the way that I should have. It can be a lot for the other parent to kind of realize, and it can be, a lot for the kid to come forward and say, because they may feel like everybody is going to be abusive towards them, regardless. And sometimes they feel like it's their fault.
Yeah. For me, my mom had like debilitating anxiety growing up. And I think I always had an awareness of that. And so I felt like I had to protect her.
Wow.
That's why I didn't tell anybody, is because I was the quote unquote strong enough one. I could just shoulder all the burden, and that would hopefully make mom be okay, or at least not make her worse.
Right. Yeah. Kids take on that role. Like it's so crazy. Like they're so small, and we look at them as miniature adults in some ways, but we still want to preserve that innocence of a child, and that need to protect. I think that just speaks to that innocence that you had, and it's unfortunate that you had that type of experience. And there's so many kids out there, so many people, adults that have gone through situations like that, and they are dealing with a lot of trauma. So I'm curious. I mean, obviously your journey, I'm sure, probably led you partially to this role of being a trauma hypnotist, but how did you actually get into this field of helping people in this way?
So I originally started out in the fitness industry because part of the trauma that I had, and I didn't know this until much later, I had this belief growing up that I was fat and ugly and no one would want me. Those were like the 3 stories that played the most in my head. And it wasn't until I started healing my stuff and I had a conversation with my mom that she told me that those were the 3 things that my biological dad told her when she was pregnant with me. So I'm in the womb, like getting this message, like unconsciously, right? But I got into the fitness industry because I was so uncomfortable in my body. I had, I bounced around with eating disorders and, going from one extreme to the other and bouncing back and forth to overeating to, starving myself to overeating to starving myself. And I started exercising as a way to feel control, which I think a lot of people do, right? A lot of times eating disorders come from a sense of, I don't have control over here. So let me like really control my food and my exercise. And that will give me a semblance of control in life. And I used to tell people all the time, I started in the fitness industry at 14, keep in mind, like I was super young, but I would tell people I never want somebody to feel as uncomfortable in their skin as I do. And my goal back then, unconsciously, was I believed if I could heal other people, I'd heal myself. And then when everything happened in my late 20s with the miscarriage and the infidelity, I started seeing a therapist. And really from talk therapy, all I got was the understanding that I had been abused. So then I did the rah-rah events. I did all the things that people do in self-development and therapy, and nothing was really making a change. Like logically, it all made sense. Mm-hmm. And what I've come to discover is a logical solution doesn't fix an emotional problem because they're 2 different parts of the brain. And so it wasn't until I like super randomly met a friend of a friend of a friend one day. And she was telling me about these hypnosis techniques that she used. And I was like, part of me was like, not going to work. Nothing else has. Like, you're just effed up. And then part of me was like, I still got to try it. Like, there's something about this that feels different. And it was a game changer. And so I originally started studying it just to heal myself. And in that process, discovered that I had a gift for it, and a gift for like kind of seeing past or the deeper root cause. Like, if somebody comes to me and they're like, I'm procrastinating, I can typically see what, like, that's the weed on the top of the garden. What's the root? And helping people work from the root. So it was really my healing journey that led me to switching from fitness into this work full time.
Wow. Okay. Very interesting kind of, journey through that. Starting at 14. Wow. That is absolutely,
that was part of my trauma. That was like my overachiever.
Yeah. Like that's wild. But I'm glad that you were able to find something that helped you make sense of your trauma and work through it. What you said that really kind of stuck out to me was about, I thought that if I could heal other people, I could heal myself. And I feel like that's so much of people who are in the helping professions journey. A lot of us go into it because of our own stuff. And I love that you have this desire to help others in this kind of innate way of connecting with people. When it comes to like working with someone that, you're helping them through trauma, through hypnosis. I know you said you can kind of see certain things on the weed of it. How do you go into like helping people identify those things within themselves and start to kind of have tools to reset their system to help them basically regulate their emotions in a healthier way?
Yeah. So over the years, I've developed a process that we take everybody through. It's not always in this specific order, but everybody kind of hits the 4 phases, and we named it RISE. So RISE. So the R stands for recalibrate the nervous system and then reprogram the limiting beliefs. I is inner child healing. S is shift the identity, and E is expand the limitations. But the place where we start everybody, which I've really come to realize has to be the foundation for everything, is the nervous system, that nervous system recalibration. Because for most of us, if we had these adverse experiences in childhood, whether it was abuse or bullying, or, you just didn't feel like you fit in. Like, my husband is the middle child. His 2 sisters are like your typical Southern, perfect blonde girls who were like cheerleaders, gymnastics, straight A students. And he was like the loud, not straight A student one. So he felt like, his trauma was that nobody understood him. He didn't fit in. So whatever that looked like for you, most of us have been living with our nervous system in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn for the majority of our life. So we're in survival mode. We're attempting to raise families, start businesses, work jobs, create lives from a place of survival. And we wonder why we can only get so far. You might make a ton of money, but then there's something else in your life that's like completely out of whack that you just can't figure out. Or maybe you have great relationships, but you're super financially stuck and you can't get out of the paycheck to paycheck cycle. So regulating the nervous system allows us to feel safe enough to do something different, because the number one job of the nervous system is to keep us alive, to help us survive. And in order to do that, we need to feel safe. And so we seek out familiar situations. And for me, like, looking back, if you were to like line up my exes up until the one with the miscarriage, it was like the same person, just the face changed and the behavior got progressively worse. Right. And I just kept saying, well, this is my type. And what I realize now is that I didn't have a type. I had a pattern.
Yeah.
And that pattern felt safe for me, even though they were all super toxic. Right. Even though they were, mentally I was put down, didn't have belief, or there was like drugs and other numbing agent, a lot of alcohol, things like that involved. So we start with that nervous system regulation because the nervous system is like the limiter. It's the cap on everything. Like, if you think of a shot glass, as being your current nervous system capacity, right? And then if you think of a gallon jug as being people's goals, people attempt to pour the gallon jug into the 1 ounce shot glass, and then they can't figure out why there's like this huge mess. Your nervous system doesn't have the capacity to hold that much yet. So we have to, I call it stretching the nervous system, and I'm saying that metaphorically, but we have to increase the capacity for what we can hold if we want our life to change. And that starts with coming out of fight, flight, freeze, fawn so that we can create something new. So that's where we start everybody. And we get the results are longer lasting and people get there faster.
Wow. Okay. So the resetting of the nervous system is also kind of a stretching of it, increasing the capacity of it.
Yeah, it's almost like a 2-step process, like getting out of that survival mode, right? Mm-hmm. Letting your nervous system know, hey, there's no bear chasing you now. So you can be like, and then it's about like that expansion into what's possible. Mm-hmm. And making your future goals feel familiar enough to your nervous system that you feel safe to go there.
Gotcha. Yeah. I notice a lot of clients, are in survival mode. This is a truly theme. And I find myself also being in survival mode, even though, as you were talking, like listen to the things like, okay, if you're financially secure and you have this secure, there's still that fear that it's going to all go bad. It's all going to all not be okay in the end. And I see that in myself and in a lot of clients. How do you kind of change the mindset when it comes to something like that?
So what I like to do is with something like that, like let's say you're making $10,000 a month and you want to feel abundant there rather than like, oh, I still barely have enough. Mm-hmm. We want to put systems in place in our life wherever we can, or routines in place so that our nervous system doesn't have to constantly be on the lookout. So if you go to the same coffee shop every single day, your nervous system goes into autopilot because it feels safe there after a while. You know the baristas, you know where the bathroom is, you know where all the tables are, right? You know some of the other regulars. But if all of a sudden one day you switch and go to a completely different coffee shop. Recently, our local grocery store completely changed everything around. And I went from being able to do my shopping in like 10 minutes. And I know this seems like a super weird analogy, but stay with me. I used to be able to do my grocery shopping in like 15 minutes with a 2-year-old to now I have no idea where anything is. And I walk around lost, right? And so when we're in this place of unfamiliar, our nervous system switches into hypervigilance mode. It switches into high alert because now it doesn't know what to expect. And so it has to be on the lookout for what could possibly harm you or kill you. And I know this seems like extreme when we're talking about grocery shopping, but keep in mind that our nervous system hasn't evolved a ton since the caveman days. And so it sees this new environment as being you stepping out of the cave and hearing the rustling in the bushes that could be a saber-tooth tiger. So the more we can create routine, and I'm not saying like routine and systemize your entire day because we don't want to live Groundhog Day, but if we can create pockets of routine throughout our day, a morning routine so that we get up and our nervous system goes into a state of calm because it knows what to expect, right? Whatever that looks like for you. I personally like to read my Bible, like to do some yoga, like to do some journaling. That's my morning routine. My husband has his own morning routine. Your morning routine might be following the Miracle Morning from Hal Elrod, or it might be checking your email and doing some work right away. Whatever it is, if we have a routine, our nervous system knows what to expect, so it can go into default mode and it's not spending energy because we have a limited amount of energy every single day. And when we're spending it on little things like what should I wear or being in the new coffee shop environment, then when there is a challenge that comes up or when those negative thought patterns come up from those old scarcity patterns, then we have less energy to redirect. So that's the first part, pockets of routine. The second part is to know that we only have 2 states of being. We either have an empowered state where we're in our power, or we have the survival mode states where we're in a primal state.
Yeah.
And there's only two ways we can go into a primal state. Number one is our life is actually in danger. So like a bear is actually chasing you. Number two is we tell ourselves stories that trigger emotions that make it feel like our life is in danger. So let's say you're in a situation where you're like that scarcity is coming up. What we want to do is we want to ask, okay, what is the story I'm telling myself right now? Coming from a family that grew up like super without a ton of money, right? Like lower middle class. There was a lot of conversations growing up around, okay, do we pay the electricity bill this month or do we pay the water bill? Mm. Do we push the mortgage and the rent for a month? Or, it was either I could have dance lessons or my brothers could play soccer, but it wasn't both. And so I had this scarcity mindset. And even when my business was doing multi-six figures, I still had these thought patterns of like, I'm never going to make a sale again. I'm going to lose everything. I'm going to end up living in a bridge under, in a cardboard box under a bridge. And I'd go into these spirals. And my husband was like, you have to stop. Like you are going to give me a heart attack. Because I'd be like, yeah, we're great financially. And the next day I'd be like freaking out. We still had money in the bank, but it was just like the stories I was telling myself. So what we want to do in that moment is ask like, what evidence do I have that this is true? So the story I was telling myself is that I'm never going to make a sale again. So, okay, how many times have I ever gone an entire month without making a sale? Never in my business, except maybe the month after I had my son when I wasn't working. Right? But otherwise, that's never happened. So we can start to realize when we ask, like, what is the evidence that I have to prove this belief right? Very rarely are you going to come up with any actual evidence. And then if you do come up with evidence, let's say you tell yourself a story of like, I'm on a podcast and I stumble over my words or I lose my train of thought. And then you tell yourself the story, I'm not good enough. People are going to think that I'm stupid. Then we would ask ourselves, okay, well, what evidence do we have for that? Well, I did stumble over my words. That's evidence. Okay, but if you were listening to Bob on a podcast or Sally on a podcast or whoever on a podcast, and they stumbled over their words and you were listening or they lost their train of thought, would you think they were stupid? Probably not, right? So if it's not true for somebody else, it can't be true for you. And then what we can do is we can say, okay, what belief would empower me in this situation? What belief about money would empower me? And I'm not saying lie to yourself, but recognize, I always have enough. God, the universe, whoever it is you believe in, always provides. I make a sale every month. Me being on a podcast, tripping over my words, shows I'm human.
Right.
Right. And then what you're doing is you're telling your mind to go and look for evidence of this new story that you're telling yourself. Now, this is going to take some time to reprogram that old belief, but if you stick to it, it will reprogram very quickly.
Yeah. And that's the tough part for a lot of people. A lot of what you kind of said is like people want that to happen overnight. They want to be able to change that belief one day and it just be it. And if it doesn't stick, then they kind of want to go back into those older patterns. But I love the idea of, examining the evidence. That's a really big part of like CBT therapy. And I love that piece of what you do to kind of help people reprogram and shift their mindset. So you're a trauma hypnotist and a high performance mindset coach. So I feel like we talked through like what you do in both of them, but how did you get into the mindset coaching piece of things?
It was really just realizing that, when I was in the fitness industry, that I was trying to make people feel better by fixing their bodies, by fixing the physical, but I could have a much deeper impact on people's lives if we worked on the brain side of things. So as I was learning the hypnosis techniques and learning all about trauma, I also studied NLP, neuro linguistic programming, to help people understand how to wire their minds to be extraordinary humans, right? Like NLP came from the human potential movement. How do we tap into our true potential and live up to our fullest capability as a human being? And that really intrigued me. And it's just, I'm forever in awe of what humans can create when they get rid of the trauma. Like, I know it seems like two ends of the spectrum, like trauma healing and then high performance mindset coaching, but they're really the same thing. Like, you cannot perform at your highest level if you're carrying around trauma and emotional baggage. And so, when we work on both sides of it together, then it always or never ceases to amaze me what people are capable of.
Wow. Yeah, I can definitely see the importance of being able to work on both. I had a situation where I just started back kind of working out, and I read something. I think actually it was a video saying that the best time to kind of meditate is right after you work out. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. But it made sense when I listen to the video. So I could, hearing you say that today, it's just like, oh, okay, this is confirmation that I need to kind of keep going down this particular path. So, yeah. Okay. So I know you've shared a bit about the things that you do, and I do want you to share a little bit more of those things. But before we go into that, I want to shift gears a bit and have you share with us how you personally connect with the idea of being self-aware and fucked up.
So when I saw the name for this podcast, I was like, it's so brilliant, because in a society that loves to judge, I think we look at the being effed up as like the negative side, right? Like it has like a negative connotation, but I feel like when we have the self-awareness that we all are, and we all are going to be, right? They say every level there's a new devil. There's always going to be something that we want to improve or fix, or that we find is effed up. And so when we develop the self-awareness, I think it's really freeing. Like, it's like, well, F the perfectionist, like, because we're never going to get there. We're all effed up. So it gives us permission to be ourselves, and just to, like, whatever your freak flag is, just let it fly.
Yeah. Gotcha. That was a good general answer. So Tiffany, I want to know how do you, like, what is your self-aware and effed up moment? Like, when did you realize, like, yeah,
okay, I gotcha. So it was after I found out that my now ex-boyfriend had the other girlfriend, found out he was a compulsive liar, just had the miscarriage. I was living in Australia at the time, in Melbourne, and I hadn't told anybody I was pregnant because I was so humiliated that I was such a quote unquote intelligent woman and didn't realize that I was being cheated on and duped in so many areas of my life. So when I miscarried, I didn't tell anybody about that either. And so I was going about business as usual. I was in downtown Melbourne, left a business meeting on a Friday afternoon, and I was surrounded by all these people laughing and talking about their plans for the weekend and talking about their plans for life. And I was just in such a dark hole that I couldn't even imagine that there would be a light at the end of the tunnel. And so I saw a taxi coming, and I was like, this is how I make my pain go away. Like, one well-timed step. I don't have to feel this pain anymore. I don't look selfish to anybody else, but I get to stop living in this pain. So mentally, I committed to taking that step. And when it was time to take it, it was like my feet were rooted to the ground, like cement. I could not move. And I realized in that moment that I was effed up and I needed to get some help. That was my moment of self-awareness.
Wow. Yeah. Definitely a really deep moment of self-awareness. And a lot of us have been there. We've had those thoughts, and we don't shy away from those type of conversations on this podcast. So I do appreciate your vulnerability and kind of sharing that moment, because a lot of us feel, that we want to unalive ourselves at times, but we don't, all have the ability to have that moment of self-awareness. Like, no, this is not it. And for those that are listening that may experience those thoughts or have any of those thoughts, you can always reach out. If you're in the States, you can always reach out to the National Lifeline at 988. But I just want to make sure I throw that in there as well. Because it is so important. And if you are international, I will put the international resources in the description of the episode so that you are able to have that if you need it. But Tiffany, I so appreciate your time and your energy today. I've learned a lot, and I know the audience has learned a lot in listening to your story and also what you do to help others. So I want to know, how can people connect with you if they want to receive your services, if they want to listen to your podcast, sign up for coaching, whatever the case may be? Like, how can they connect with you and learn more about you?
Yeah, so our podcast is called The Cycle Breaker Show. It's on every podcast platform. And all of our contact details are in the show notes of every episode. So that's probably the easiest way, since you're already listening to a podcast, just to search The Cycle Breaker Show. Otherwise, if on any social media channel, if you look up Tiffany Toombs, you'll find me, and feel free to just shoot me a message and connect.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you so much for sharing your time and your energy. Guys, please make sure that you connect with Tiffany, listen to her podcast, make sure that if you are interested in her services that you sign up to connect with her. Also, be sure to follow me, Tree the LPC, on all social media platforms under the handle Tree the LPC. Until next time, be safe, be well, and make sure that you take care of your mental health.